Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kimberly Knox. I am a civil judge. I am currently assigned in New Britain. However, I sat in New London commencing in 2017, and I've been here in New Britain on the civil division since 2021. Why don't we go around? I don't know what the view is, but I'll call the next person out, and that person can invite the next person. Attorney Barney.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Attorney Barney, my practice is entirely criminal and motor vehicle defense. My office is in Milford. That's where I got to know Judge Brown very well, and it's my pleasure and honor to be a part of this group, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me. I will go with Mr. Troy Brown.
Thank you, Attorney Barney.
Yes,
my
sir.
name is Troy Brown. I am the Judicial Branch Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. I just started that position last year, 2023. Prior to that, I was working in Court Support Service Division, where I was the Assistant Director overseeing training, programs and services, multicultural affairs, and a couple other departments. I've been with the branch approximately 26 years. And
how about Judge Wilson?
Thank you, Peter. Hi, I'm Judge Robin Wilson, and I sit in New Haven District in the Civil Division, and I've been a judge for 20 years, and I've been in the New Haven District in Civil since 2009. I was also a member of the Jury Selection Task Force, the Data Statutes and Rules Subcommittee. Thank you. Do you want me to?
How about Mr. Grealish?
Thanks, Judge Brown. My name is Joe Grealish. I'm the Director of Performance Management and Statistics for the branch. I've worked for the branch about 26 years, probably started right when Troy did. Probably in the same class, Troy. And what my connection with the jury, we've done stuff. My unit does a lot of analysis for the branch in different topical areas. We've surveyed jurors before, and the Chief Justice asked us to do a preliminary evaluation of some of the data that we had, and asked me to also show you what's being collected by the jury system and what's being collected by the clerks. And I think that, part of it is that my unit's really familiar with what lies in the system. And I think the Chief Justice's goal was to try to find out how we can make sense of it and how we can make the jury system better based on the data that lies in the system.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll note that we're also joined by Melissa Farley and Nicole D. Benedetto as well. Thank you very much for assisting us and joining us today. Did we miss anyone? No. Okay. So I believe that the first thing that we were going to do, Judge Knox, was to review the charge. Would you like to do that?
So yes, you all should have received a copy of the charge from Chief Justice Robinson. And our charge is going to be to review the juror demographic data that is being collected, to prioritize which data should be analyzed, to compare the demographics of jurors to an appropriate source of demographic data, such as the U.S. Census Bureau or any other source that we deem to be appropriate, to undertake an exhaustive review of the data collection practices in other states, and finally, and probably most important, to issue a report to the Chief Justice on or before, I believe it's October 1st now, is that correct, Melissa? Of 2024, summarizing the data analysis. So that is our charge. And I think we have some terrific people on this committee that are going to help us with that, and have some terrific resources that we'll be able to avail ourselves in that process. So that is our charge at this time.
So my understanding, Mr. Grealish, is that you may have some information that might be helpful to kind of help kick off sort of what we're looking at here, with an eye towards, ultimately what our goal is. Is there any info you can share with us?
Sure. If I could share the screen, I'll show you what I have, just to give you a couple ideas of the data that's being collected right now, and let me know when you can see the screen. So there's a sheet up there that shows it's the confidential juror questionnaire. It actually doesn't go out in paper form any longer. The way we collect it is people can log online at home and fill out the demographic information that's on this page. And then what happens is if they come in for voir dire and they haven't filled it out, there's a kiosk within the courthouse that they're directed to go over to the kiosk and fill the survey out completely. And so so in effect, anyone that appears for voir dire, we should have the information if they filled it out on the form. And on this particular form, you can, I don't know if it's too small to read, but I'll make it a little larger so you can get a.
Thank you.
Is that better or?
Much better.
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, I'll just go down. It's just so you can kind of see the fields that are collected. We have the date of birth. We have permanent residency. You're a resident of Connecticut. Highest education level. Marital status. Gender, there's 3 options on the gender: female, male, and X. This has been a little bit difficult, unfortunately, but you can only select one in the race column on question 9. So you can't identify with multiple races, which, you know, I know is the ideal, like the census does that too. We've tried with the vendor, and the vendor is really rigid on making changes because that's really a significant change to make that happen. You can identify as Hispanic or Latino with a yes/no answer. There's an open-ended question about present occupation. It asks who you're employed by. Then there's a couple questions about civil union. There's, have you been convicted of a criminal offense? And then it asks what the nature of it was. Have you been a party to a civil action? And then what happens is this gets loaded into a database. And so it's identified by the juror. The juror has a unique ID. And so we'll have all this background information related to this individual. So this is one of the forms of collection of information that we have from the jurors. The other occurs on the day of jury voir dire. If an individual is assigned to a panel, we have the jurors fill out these forms, and they're called jury activity records. We went through a little process, but we got all of these pre-populated at the top, and the candidate's name would appear like Smith here. And what would happen is each juror would have a unique form, and then we captured some of the additional information that people sought that the jury system actually couldn't accommodate. And so one of the things that's been a really difficult thing, we're still trying to work this out, is the order in which the candidates were questioned. And the reason why that's problematic is, as you know, at the beginning of cases, the judge may query a group of people to ask if they know anyone and then determine any hardships or conflict. And it's really more in a group format initially, even though they ask the individuals more specific pointed questions about it. So it's been difficult to get the actual order. We're much better at that one when the people are actually questioned individually and actually considered as a juror rather than when they get moved out. And then a big part of what the Chief Justice indicated was really they wanted to get an idea of how frequently the Batson challenge occurred. And we wanted to capture more than the system could do. And I'll give you a description of what the system, one of the limitations and why we had to go to this form is a challenge for cause can occur obviously at any point. Let's say the plaintiff did a challenge for cause. We asked staff to fill that out. And if that was an unsuccessful challenge for cause, then let's say the plaintiff elected to utilize a peremptory challenge. We have them select both boxes so we know what actually occurred in this case. And then let's say the peremptory challenge was challenged by the defendant and a Batson challenge was either successful or not successful. We're going to capture that And we're also going to capture if the person was seated as a juror, not seated as a juror, or as an alternate. And so you can kind of see that we wanted to get like the whole array of what could occur. The unfortunate thing with the computer system itself, which is a fairly new system, is that it would record that the person was seated as a juror, but you often wouldn't know the path it took to get there. So in my example, if the plaintiff exercised a challenge for cause, exercised a peremptory challenge, then was challenged by the defendant, and it was a successful Batson challenge, the juror could be seated. All the system would show is the juror was seated, and we wouldn't have any of these other possibilities of what occurred. So we wanted to capture them all. And then there were a couple of potential outs in the system. We often bring a group of people down to the courtroom, and there may be one or two that the questioning, they may not get to it because the day ends or the jury is fully selected at that point. So we asked them to indicate that the juror was not used, but they were actually assigned to a panel. Or the other two, which occur more at the beginning of the case, whether there was a hardship or a conflict that occurred. And hardship we defined loosely as a candidate, like a single parent, no child care, self-employed, can't miss work, sole proprietor. And then the conflicts are more they know the judge, the attorneys, or the parties involved in the case. And that gives you a little idea of the collection. Now, prior to meeting with the Chief Justice, as I said, we did some preliminary stuff where we want to look at just data in general. And we really focused on race ethnicity in the data analysis that we did. And what I'll do is after the meeting, I'll send you a copy of both those documents that I just showed and the one that I'm going to just briefly go over with you and show you kind of what we did so you can get a good look and pour through it a little bit and see what you think. I'm going to make this a little larger so you can see it. So this gives you an idea of, we looked at the year period of time between 11/1/22 and 10/31/23. Now, the thing to keep in mind is not all of our courthouses were up and running at that point. I'm just going to show you the schedule that occurred there. So these are the courthouses: Derby, Ansonia, Milford, Hartford, Rockville were all the first group of courthouses that started using the jury system. They started using it on 11/1/22. And then we picked up in April of 2023, the courthouses New London, Middletown, New Haven, Meriden, Waterbury, and Danielson. And the last group and the most recent group that are in the jury system that have all the enhanced data are New Britain, Danbury, Bridgeport, Torrington, and Stamford. If I go back to where we were. So during that time frame, we're really dealing with the data that's in the system because that has all of the demographic information. And so when we looked at it, there were 35,000 summoned jurors that appeared and actually filled out all those forms that I showed you. And of those, 23,000 were assigned to a voir dire panel, and there were 11,000 that actually never were assigned to a panel, meaning that they came to the courthouse and they were released from the jury room or they waited in the jury room to see if they were going to get selected for a jury. And so that's basically 2/3 of the people that show up were assigned to a panel and 1/3 were not. And so when we looked at the demographics of things, we broke it into the categories that were on the form. And we also did a little overlay. We looked at the US Census for Connecticut for that same time frame so that you could have some point of comparison to see, does it track the population in the state? So you can see that some of the categories do track and some don't. And this other category is something that we had on the form, and people could elect not to identify under a race at all. And then we did a similar thing with male and female, so you could kind of see the breakdown of male and female in X. And then there was a group of people that didn't identify at all. And then if we go down a little further, then if you remember the boxes that I went through quickly on that form that the clerks keep track of, we have one for each of the items that are listed there. So we have challenge for cause, we have peremptory challenge, we have Batson challenge, and we have some of the other categories, and we break it up by race and ethnicity. And so what you can see is we on this chart, we broke it up in two ways. There's one within the race. So what that calculation is there were 71 people overall, 2 of them were challenged. So 2.82% of the people that identified as Alaskan Native or Native American were challenged for cause. And so how you would look at this column is, does one stand out more than the other? Well, yes, this particular one stands out more. And you can see the magnitude of how it stands out by just the raw numbers. Then the other thing we did was we did it as a percentage of all races. So if 1.67% of everyone that was challenged for cause was Alaskan Native or a Native American. So what I would suggest is, like, this particular column is something that you probably could compare to the Census Bureau information and kind of get an idea. Does it lay out like the census does? This column gives you more like, does one particular race within the number of challenges causes stand out as being challenged more frequently? And so we did that for every category. We did it for the plaintiff. We did it for the defendant. And then we did it for each one of those, basically the challenges. So you can kind of see if anything stands out, you know, this is the highest one in the category, the people who elected not to identify their race. And we have it for each one of those. So I'm just going to spin down here just to make sure. So there were not many peremptory challenges at all. There were only 3 statewide during that period that got recorded, you know, in the new system, out of those tens of thousands that reported. And we broke down kind of the category male and female. And then let me just see what else. Oh, and race. So we did male, female, and race on this one. And then we did the same thing for who got selected as a juror. So you kind of have an idea of what the composition of the juries look like amongst the people that got selected. So we looked once again, within the race and then among all races. So 66, let's round this up, 66% were white Americans that were jurors in the total pool. We looked at alternate jurors, same way. And then we looked at the individuals that were excused and kind of looked at the composition of the people that were excused for first hardship. And then we looked at conflict. And then we looked at the people who sat in the room that never made it out of the jury assembly room. And I think, let me just check quickly. Oh, I'm sorry. This was, my bad on that one. This was, they were assigned to a panel, but they weren't used. So they actually went to the jury room and they were never questioned. And the last group right here is the group that were not assigned. They were in the jury room. And then we did it by court location. And we just gave you the breakdown of that. So I will definitely mail that out to everyone. Email it out so that you can take a look at it. You know, we looked at very cursory in that we only looked at race and ethnicity on the whole. There were a lot of other elements that were in that other document that showed, like date of birth, and we could look at age of people. There's all kinds of different angles you could look at it, and so I feel like there's a lot of untapped stuff. And now that we brought it up into the point where I'm going to produce, just get the data set for November and December, because every courthouse was on board at that point, and we can get some data out on that if once the committee decides what direction they want to go in. But that's what we have right now. Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Judge Wilson.
Sure. Hi, Judge Wilson.
How are you? Thank you. Thank you. That was very good and very helpful.
Sure.
And I might have missed this, but is there a percentage of the demographics for the initial pool of the juror composition, meaning when they come in, like the jury administrator, or actually not when they come in, but the pool that is summoned to come in is what I'm asking. Is there data on who is summoned to come in and broken down by percentage of, what demographics? How many Asian coming in? How many African Americans? Do we have that information?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And unfortunately, the data that's collected on race and ethnicity is collected through that online, and they tend to be the people that only report. Is like the people that either didn't respond to the survey. We don't have a source of the data of people who had returned mail or didn't show up on the day they were supposed to, show up. We only have it on the people that filled out those forms, and those are the people that were voir dired in effect.
So you would only be able to collect that information regarding the pool that comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know what I'm saying? You would only, if they fill out that form.
Yes, absolutely true. And I think that there may be some people that fill out the form that didn't show up the day of jury service. So they went online and filled it out. There may be data that we can cull from that, but it's not going to be comprehensive. It's going to be very, it's going to be very thin, I think, on the people that filled out the form that didn't show up. And, I completely agree with you. And I think that it's when you look at a picture to see how it transpires through the whole course of the jury process, which is kind of what we did with the voir dire process, but it would be nice to start where it starts, right?
Right. I think it's fair, when you have Batson challenges. I mean, to look, well, what was the makeup of the entire pool that came in at 8 o'clock in the morning? That's the best way I could put it. So that the numbers, I think, are fairly read in terms of Batson challenges, in terms of the peremptory challenges, who's getting excused, and what their race is. Because the smaller the pool, those numbers, I think, I don't know, I'm not a statistician, but it seems to me that if the pool doesn't reflect a wide demographic, then the numbers come down where the peremptory challenges show a higher number of African Americans that are being excused. Somehow seems like there's an unfairness there if you don't know what the entire pool is made up of.
Yeah, and I think that when we went into the analysis that we did there, the thought process was, because we start at the beginning of the voir dire process, we want that to look at least like the Census Bureau breakdown, right? Because if you go in lower on the racial breakdowns, let's say if it's African American, right, is lower going in, and then you're losing more people along the process. So you get to the juror and you're really low. What I would want to see in a system, right, is that across the board, you have at least parity, right? The summoning to the voir dire, to the challenge, to the ultimate who sits on the jury. You want at least parity, if not better than parity. So it's one of those things that you can kind of see what occurred during the process and how people may have been excluded during the process, but you really can't tell who is excluded, like coming through the door, other than knowing what the census breakdown is and, knowing what the areas consist of for breakdowns racially, So I mean, I think that's something that certainly should be looked into, but it's hard because we don't have the people self-reporting, other than the form. Well, I think you're on mute, Judge Knox.
If I understand this correctly, the summons goes out to a much larger group, but we don't get the demographic data until they self-report in response to the summons. So that's the data we have to rely on at this point. I'm not sure how we would be able to collect data as to who the summons goes out, because the whole system is reliant on the self-reporting in response to the summons.
And I know one of the concerns, like just for example, is in Bridgeport for years they had a 40% undeliverable rate, right? And so, I mean, I ran my own theory on what was occurring is that you deliver to the original address that has a good distribution, a significant number of people within the confines of Bridgeport, and then what happens is it comes back undelivered. And without that old formula, what would happen is it would just go out and they would summon and it'd end up out in like Fairfield County. It's no longer in Bridgeport, and the demographic may be different there and you get a different group. And that's the one thing that's really frustrating, not to know that element of it, is what are the demographics on that front end of it? And I would love to have that, but I think it's sources of information that we may need to check out and see if anything's good.
Is it Attorney Brown?
Director Brown.
Director Brown, I thank you.
or Troy. So I have a question, Joe, and maybe you answered this already. Although we don't have the demographics of the information, excuse me one second, although we don't have the demographics of the information of the individuals who may have received a summons but didn't respond, do we know how many people actually received it so that we can determine how many people didn't respond and say, of the 3,000 people who did show up, we actually sent it to 5,000 people, 2,000 people did not show up, and we have the towns that where those folks live. Or we have the zip code that shows even more better than the town, it's even more specific.
Yeah, I think that may be a way to get around the fact that we don't have specific data and then go to census related data to the degree that we can do it by zip code, because we do have who it was sent to, right? Like the zip codes of who it was sent to. So that's definitely in the larger database of the summoning process. And part of the formula that the legislature put in place depends on you resummoning from the same population, same zip code area. So that was kind of in the process to bring the numbers back up to what it should be, as opposed to just going to another district altogether.
I think that summons data is something that we're going to need, even if it doesn't give us the demographic detail, but to know what the numbers are. That I think that probably is a foundational inquiry that we may want to have access to.
Yeah, without question. And I'm going to show you something quickly if I can pull it up here quickly. Let me just see. I want to give you an idea of just how wild the summoning process is. I'll show you here. Okay, so you share this real quickly. Let me know when you can see it, and I'll make it a little larger here. So this report's from 2022, but they do it every year, and it gives you an idea of kind of some of the elements of the flow, like how many summons were issued. There were over 500,000 summons issued. And then it shows you different things like how many got disqualified, and then how many were excused by the court. And I'm trying to see, this report doesn't have it, but they have it, is how many got returned because of an undeliverable address. So we have that information, so you can kind of get a grander picture of what the process looks like. And that's online, but we have more than even that that's online, that kind of gives you a better picture of, people that, there were people that were over 70. There were people that didn't speak English, that didn't feel comfortable, serving on jury. So they told their circumstances and they were excused.
You've piqued my interest. You say that this is online. Where is it online?
There's actually the little known statistics page. There's a left menu on the main website. So if you go, let me just show you quickly here. If you go to just the main Connecticut Judicial Branch website, there's a menu over here that gives you kind of quick links. And if you go down here, see statistics and reports. If you click that, it'll show different areas, like we'll have civil and family and criminal, but then there's jury administration. So one of the options is jury administration.
Thank you. That's, I think,
Sure.
is something we're all going to want to look at as we move through this process. So we have had an opportunity to take a look at least one area of demographic data. I guess one of the initial questions I would have for the committee as we move forward is, we now know that juror demographic data is being collected by the judicial branch. The question I have is, what demographic data do we as a committee want to be looking at, and how should we be prioritizing which data should be analyzed? So that was a tremendous presentation in one area. But I kind of would like to throw it out to the committee as to what do you think the scope of our charge is, and what other demographic areas should we be looking at? Director Brown, can I just pick on you for a moment?
Why not?
I would just like to take the benefit of your experience in the job that you just recently, to see if you could help guide us a little.
I'm actually not sure yet. I'm still processing your question. I think it's a very good question. And so I'm trying to think, okay, what do I need to see based upon what Mr. Grealish just showed us? I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if I
Fair
want to.
enough. I'm not sure either.
I'm not sure if I want to delve a little further into the demographic information that we have now, and I certainly understand what issues that might cause with us not matching up with census data and so forth. I may want to do that. I am thinking now, but I don't know. We can't do that either. I was thinking about socioeconomic status within those racial and ethnic and gender categories, but I don't know if we're going to have that information because I'm pretty sure we may not ask for that. So I don't have an answer for you at the moment.
Fair enough.
Judge Knox, I can tell you what the Data, Statutes, and Rules Subcommittee, our recommendations were, and for the overall, task force that was established by the Chief Justice. So I don't know if it will be helpful or not, but I can, if you want me to, let you know.
Is that something that you're able to share, Judge Wilson? Because I think that
I have it in front of me. So the first recommendation was to collect additional data on the characteristics of prospective jurors, which is what we're doing, including attributes that the judicial branch believes could be the basis of disparate treatment in jury selection by making changes to the confidential questionnaire, which we've done, and asking the questions in reference to gender and such other demographic information. And that was adopted by Public Act, effective in 2022. And then retain the demographic non-personally identifiable data on jurors to be publicly available for research, examination, and educational purposes. That was also adopted. And then collect records on for cause and peremptory challenges that reflect the identity of the first chair trial counsel as the party asserting the challenge. So those go right to the heart of the what the Chief Justice wanted by establishing the among other things, establishing the jury selection task force. That was in reference to the recommendations regarding the data statutes and rules subcommittee. I don't know if that helps you or if that's what you were asking.
Well, I think, in all fairness, that may raise more questions than it answers, but it's definitely.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
It's terrific to be fully informed as to all the parameters that we're looking at. And that may be something that we all need to take a look at what the PowerPoint that was presented and absorb the information. I have to admit, Mr. Grealish, it was very thorough, but it was relatively quick. I actually want to sit back and study it a little bit, and I think all of us are going to have additional questions and want perhaps additional information. I am comfortable saying I think we want that initial summons information to be added to our packet of information. That I am confident of saying. What other demographic data we want to delve into, I think we're going to probably have to take up again at the next meeting, in all fairness. The next question I have is, we are looking at U.S. Census Bureau data as a source of comparison. Is there any other appropriate source of demographic data that we should be using to compare our juror demographic data to, or is the Census Bureau the most appropriate? Does anyone have any thoughts or comments?
I want to say that towns capture some information as well. I don't know how helpful that would be, because I'm not exactly sure how far out I'm trying to figure out how far, if we identify a town, and so that a town relates to a judicial jurisdiction or demographic GA location, I should say.
Right.
And so I think towns capture some of this data. I'm not sure. I want to say they do it for school systems, but I'm not sure.
They don't rely on the census data as for their.
I believe they do. What I was trying to come up with is with something that we can cross-reference it with. I thought that's what you're asking. And
yes.
So we have the U.S. Census, but I think towns also keep some of this information as well for the purpose of schools, at least for the purpose of schools, and therefore we can cross-reference. I was just trying to answer that question.
Yes, yes.
Judge Knox, there are other data collections, but I can't tell you. I mean, I did this research a while back for my law review article, but I can look it up. There are others other than the Census Bureau to collect data that states use. I can't put my hands on it right now, but I can try to find it.
Okay, so that's something else we might want to just consider is, the U.S. Census Bureau data obviously is a reliable source, and I think we can all acknowledge that. But I wondered if we wanted to just make sure that we hadn't overlooked any other demographic data source that we should also be relying on. So, Judge Wilson and Director Brown, if you could perhaps just make inquiry at the appropriate time, that would be appreciated. The next question, and I think I'm going to pose this to Mr. Grealish because I had an opportunity to speak to him before this meeting, is what are other states, and do we have any resources as to what other states are doing in both collecting and analyzing juror demographic data?
Sure. You know, it's interesting because when we met with the Chief Justice on the preliminary stuff, he asked me to contact the National Center for State Courts, which is really like a body that collects a lot of information across different disciplines. And jury is one of the things they track. And they have a person named Paula Hannaford that actually is the contact for jury at the National Center. And she said, when I showed her what we had, she's like, you guys are way ahead of everyone else on the collection side of it. Now, I think the big thing is that the goal of the committee is probably like, that's all well and good and collective, but what can you do with that info? Like, what are you trying to find? You know, what information can you find that's actionable, that where there may be some disparities? How do you change that? You know, with the data, and so she said that from that standpoint we were way ahead. She mentioned that Maricopa County, she sent a report that I can share with everyone. Did a report, but it was like a one-time thing rather than something like we plan to do, which is produce this often. You know, whatever the result is, our legislature wants us to post it annually. You know, the whatever data we find and whatever information we find. And she also said what was interesting, just going back to the last conversation, that from the National Center point of view, the U.S. Census Bureau is the gold standard. But listening to Troy, it's interesting because listening to Troy, I agree with Troy, is that if you can get that down to like zip code level, which I'm not sure the census does, if it could be broken up to that level, and we can find out some of the things that Judge Wilson mentioned, you know, like how does it start off and how does the pool shrink from the beginning? That may be very interesting and tell a lot too, you know, so it may be a combination, and there's probably other sources, you know. I mean, I've seen other things like even like the Red Cross they do numbers, and they use an algorithm to estimate when there may be a larger immigrant population, you know, so that may not be someone, but may, you know, I don't, because the roles that the different sources that they use for the data come from places where it's not unfathomable that an immigrant was listed in that group of people, you know. And if you're trying to get the full picture of how summoning whittles down, you probably want to find out, you know, all of that data. And so, but Paula is a source for us at NCSC, and you know, she'd be willing to talk to anyone on the committee. She told me that, you know, that wants to discuss it. It's her favorite topic, and and she loves that we're like pushing ahead to try to do something positive with it. So,
does anybody else have any other questions? All right, so that is our kind of our preliminary charge, the information we have today, the information that we now know we have access to. I guess I'm looking for a proposal as to how we move forward and what kind of schedule we want moving forward. Judge Brown, who is, I think, had to leave because he got a note from his jury, and I had an opportunity to speak in advance, and we thought it would probably be prudent, in light of the short period of time we have to render our report, to meet on a monthly basis. He and I both discussed either Tuesday or Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. And we were suggesting like either the third or the fourth week of each month on a Tuesday or a Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. I realize this is going to interrupt and be difficult, particularly for the judges, but I'm hoping, Judge Wilson, you will join us in trying to make the time to accommodate that on a regular basis, because I do think we should work forward to getting our summary report completed. Does anybody have a preference within that time frame that I've proposed?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying I could be fairly flexible, Your Honor, so that certainly a monthly basis works, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Director Brown?
I'm very comfortable with monthly. I'm just taking a look at my calendar. I do trainings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if I had a preference, I think I'm going to go for Thursday. If I have a preference, they're
Yeah.
all day trainings, and then I'll just have to figure out which one works and does not work.
All right. Is the second, third, or fourth week better for anybody? Because here we are on the 26th, so the third Thursday of March would be the 21st. The fourth would be the 28th, and I would like to shoot for one of those two. And that'll kind of set us up for the future.
Let's see. Said March would be the 20.
For me, fine.
I cannot do the 21st.
Okay, so it'll be the fourth Thursday of every month.
Yeah, I can do that.
Fourth. May has 5, but it'll still be the fourth Thursday of every month. Okay. Now, as we move toward our next meeting, what information do you think we're going to get all the information that we just saw today? What additional information would you like to have as we move toward our next meeting? And I'd love to hear from the committee.
This is all incredibly fascinating and new to me, so I'm just going to say that what Grealish offered by way of email, that it was a little bit difficult for me to see on the screen, and of course I'm using my phone. But for me, that would be the most that would be the most helpful to start off for me diving into this.
I agree. I would like to get a chance to digest the information that Mr. Grealish has shared with us, so that'll be just fine.
Okay. All right. So this is an initial meeting, and obviously you just got your appointment letters a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to call this a successful first meeting. And Mr. Grealish, thank you so much for the wealth of information. I don't know if the rest of you feel this way, but I am so delighted to know that we have access to all of this incoming data already.
Yes.
It's just a matter of, I think, quite frankly, I don't mean to do this to Mr. Grealish, but it's just a matter of asking for it. And it's being collected, which is remarkable, and it's exciting to know that we have access to it. Be thinking about it, whether or not there's any additional information before the next meeting. Communicate with either, if anybody in the committee wants additional information before the next meeting, please communicate. You're welcome to talk to each other, obviously, but please communicate with either Judge Brown or myself about what information you think would be helpful as we move into the next meeting. And we will make every effort to get that information available before the next meeting. Is there anything anyone else can think about that we should address before we adjourn for today? I'm opening the floor to anyone.
No, Judge.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you again. I look forward, and I speak on behalf of Judge Brown, I look forward to working with all of you, and I appreciate the work that Mr. Grealish did. I appreciate the fact that Judge Wilson and Director Brown are going to get us some more information, and we will see you at our next meeting on the fourth Thursday of March. Did I count right? That's the 28th, right? Okay, March 28th. At 3 p.m. and you will receive a notice and a Teams invite from, is it Nicolette or Nicole? Nicola. She's here with us still. If you could just
Nicole.
Nicole, yes, and you'll get the information directly from Nicole. And on that note, thank you, and everyone have a very pleasant afternoon. Court, we're going to adjourn. Not the court's not going to adjourn, but we're going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
day,
you
everyone.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nice to meet you.
Take care.
Thank you, Your Honor.